Hi everyone, I promise to drive fast towards our point today. Design and fashion and cars. My name is Paolo Tumminelli. I am the founder of the Good Brands Institute and a design professor at the University of Applied Sciences in Cologne. Design, that is for me the culture of consumption. Speaking of which, two dimensions rank highest: fashion and, you name it, the automobile. Therefore, I can't wait to engage in this talk with Domagoj Dukec, the head of BMW Design, and David Fischer, the founder of Highsnobiety.com. Domagoj, David, start your engines, and would you please shortly introduce yourselves?
Yes, hi, thank you, Paolo. As you mentioned, I'm very happy to be with you here, and what can I say about me? I'm the bad guy who's responsible for destroying this nice brand of BMW, although I love the brand since my childhood, so I'm curious to get into the talk with you.
Really nice to meet you guys. I'm David. I'm the founder of Highsnobiety, a youth culture publisher, creative and marketing services agency, and direct-to-consumer brand.
Wonderful. I mean, you're going to have a great discussion. Thank you, Domagoj, for opening like that. Cars, Tom Wolfe once noted, are freedom, style, sex, power, motion, color, everything. I love the automobile, but I do rub in if needed. Of course, with BMW on board, we must deal with the new iX, which has been called a radical revolution in the design of the Bavaria Motor Works, although actually it has not real engine inside, it's fully electric. And the iX has been called provocative too, which is, I believe, a great starting point for a discussion. With Highsnobiety on board, we must discuss new directions in the design of fashion, or should we say, in the fashion of design. One of the big words today is collaborations. We want to hear more about what the fashion and the car industry can learn from each other. So now, let's go. Let's speak of inspiration. Everybody's happy when fashion explores cultural diversity. Italy's Gucci gives dragons, and Valentino launched a Chinese-inspired collection in Beijing last year. Domagoj, now I was thinking, what if a German car brand does that? Besides, to many of their fans worldwide, BMW is not even German, it's Bavarian, and so it must stay. It's interesting, I believe they forget that BMWs have been designed by Italians, by Frenchmen, by Americans. The Group Chief Designer today, your boss, is Dutch, and you are Croatian with German background. So what do you look for inspiration, and how easy it is for you, as you said before, to jog between local heritage and global culture?
Yes, we are based in Bavaria, but I think today in this time you can't speak from local products, except you are somewhere in food industry and you want really regional products. But if you think just how the whole chain of suppliers is worldwide, where you produce, where your market is, it means you as a global company you have to answer on all demands of worldwide customers, and therefore also you can't just look on what happens in Bavaria. So I think our inspiration must be really the global evolution of values, which is also geo-regional different, and how can you manage to make one product which pleases somehow all these values and requirements, which is a difficult task, as we are not such a lifestyle product as a car with a 7-year life cycle, and therefore we can't make for each geo-region one particular car. So you have to somehow find a balance between these different values.
First of all, the question, I guess, is what inspiration are we talking about? Are we talking about the inspiration of BMW designers and where does the brand get inspired, or are we actually talking about where does the consumer get inspired? And so, for example, we of course spend a lot of time analyzing where a young consumer gets inspired and why they get inspired, and the significance of inspiration also in a customer journey, so to speak. And for example, we came to a conclusion in some recent research that we did with Boston Consulting Group that the inspiration phase for a young consumer, Gen Z, young millennial consumer, is actually where they make their purchasing decisions. So they decide right there when they get inspired what product they're going to purchase. And then as a consequence of that, you of course ask yourselves, okay, so how can we inspire them and where can we inspire them? And so it's a lot about also the channels that you use, to reach those consumers and to catch them in many ways. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges that the car industry needs to come across is how can they be more inspiring to their consumer base and think less about just inspiring them once every 7 years or every 5 years when a new model or a model upgrade comes to market, because you need to go to a model where you're constantly in conversation with your consumer, not just once every 4 or 5 years. How can you achieve something like that in an industry that is, of course, that has an engineering background, and not so much a communication and service background in a sense, But we, of course, think all day only about a very specific person, right? I mean, we think about kind of this new luxury space, and then a person that we call the cultural pioneer, this young, influential person that spends a lot more money than a regular young person on luxury goods, and is almost on some level an evangelist for brands because they know so much about brands, so they speak a lot about them and have a certain effect. And when we're talking about reaching that type of consumer, I think it's you always, and that's why collaborations in our world matter so much. You almost have to find translators. How do you translate the automotive to the cultural pioneer that may not need it today, right? It's not in their life. A car is just not something, for the most part, that they need. Certainly not on a daily basis. And that's where I think, having a certain focus in who your translator is really important. And in the case of BMW, I think the most natural, prism, or filter is art. Because that's something that BMW has built also over a really long time with art cars and whatnot. And so I think it could be really interesting to consider how do you speak through art to this new young consumer base a lot more frequently, because art is something that they're already interested in, right? So they may not be interested in cars right now, but they're interested in art. The same way they're interested in fashion and sports and other things, But I think the most interesting and most authentic translator for you is art, And so I think that could be a really cool way of connecting the dots.
I also think there is something that comes out of what Domagoj has explained, and even you stressed upon. The cars is a bit different than clothing. You wear your clothes. You can wear a watch, you hold your smartphone in your hand, but the car is an interface to landscape, to metropolises, to space, basically. And one thing I always have reflected upon, being often around the world, is how different cars look depending from where you see them. What is the relationship to the customers now? You think of one car that has been a cornerstone in BMW design, the 1500 back in 1961. This was a completely new car, crisp line, perpendicular body, very airy design. It was like nothing else on the road back then, and people immediately got it. Now, in your design evolution, it's more of a step-by-step process, and it seems that with every step, people find it hard to follow. So hard that they basically criticize every details, almost not accepting the change anymore. I believe this is a problem because people love change in fashion and they don't seem to love change in car design anymore. What's the problem?
Yes, it's true. And people love change, and even they are asking for change, and they want almost every quarter year they want a new outfit, because this is how the fashion industry works. But the thing is, maybe because the today with social media, with internet, people are so saturated with everything is changing. Every day somebody's telling you this is the latest shit. This is what you must have. So because there are so many influencers which are telling you every day, maybe 5 times per day, showing you different outfits you must have. So actually this is quite stressful for some people. And now imagine just with a car. I mean, a car is not something you can afford to change every year. And not even every 5 years. And so I think this is where people are today, in a time where everything is changing and they are looking for some stability.
David, I have you quoted with cars being or playing a minor role within the Highsnobiety community. Do you think what Domagoj just said is the reason for that?
I mean, I think in principle the main reason is, quite frankly, age, right? Because I think I think most people buy cars based on circumstances in their life. Like you buy a car because you had your first kid. You buy a car because you moved to a house outside of town, right? You don't buy a car according to BMW deciding to launch it. Like it's. I mean, I think that's also quite a big difference in regards to fashion, in a sense. And it's a matter of price. So I think it depends, but I certainly think that car companies can do a better job in trying to appeal to this new consumer that they're maybe not talking to yet that much, and I think the interesting part, of course, there's so much happening in the car industry, right? I mean, there's the sustainability discussion, electrification, so. The car companies are being pulled in a lot of different directions, and none of the answers are easy. Like I mean, it's a huge change job that needs to happen there. To Domagoj's earlier point, you need to probably become even more clear about your underlying values and what your brand stands for, because the differentiation under the hood, so to speak, will almost evaporate. In the future. Because it'll be all quite similar. Like having 100 horsepower more is not going to be, it's not gonna get you new customers anymore. And so, I think it'll be quite exciting to look at what's happening there.
So David's message is it's not a matter of liking or not liking the automobile. It's a matter of age and convenience, perhaps. So. The love for the automobile perhaps is still there, but it needs to be triggered. Is that perhaps a matter of taste, even what you were saying before that, Domagoj? Well, discussing taste is a bit tricky. Kant, the philosopher, said it's a private matter. It cannot and it should not be disputed. But I believe one of the most significant changes in the business of fashion has been how consumer communities have removed the dictatorships of taste. The Christian Dior kind of approach to designing what is good and what is bad in fashion. Fashion has learned from the street, and it has helped people accept fluid boundaries between styles. Now, for once, Domagoj, do you still discuss beauty in cars?
Who or what is beautiful, of course, the customer decides, because it's a very subjective element. So it's so personal and so private that everybody for himself can just decide, yes, for me it's beautiful. But in my eyes, in design, it's not about beauty or ugly, because this is so relative. You will never see that everybody wants to wear the same thing. The same with car. But I believe, and I know also in our competence, there is no bad design what we do. There's everything well executed. There's everything's just justification. But if you like it or not, is of course a very subjective thing. And it has to do much more with just beauty or ugly. It has to do with image, with status. Is it perceived? If I drive it, will other people appreciate that I'm somebody who's cool, up to date? And this depends also a lot of, are you a social driver? Are you a social climber? And of course, outside you have a lot of different people who are not all at the same level. And this is a difficulty in design, but it's up to us to decide how a BMW should look on, of course, on the base of the values of our customers. Yeah, because every car we do is individually designed for a certain customer, and they don't look all the same. And that's the main difference.
David, how do you see that? I mean, in fashion, people use and can combine things to express their culture and so their taste and even perhaps develop it. Do you see, in some direction you already anticipated, do you see a chance for the automobile to learn something from how people approach fashion?
I mean, I think in general, I think the design process in fashion has become a lot more democratic. And where you mentioned Christian Dior, where in the old times it was all about coming up with an idea, suggesting something, and then it would start there at the top of the pyramid, and step by step find its way into the market. Up until the high street would then also be interpreting a certain trend in different ways, and bring it to the masses. I think what's happened in fashion is that the very best in the market, even on the luxury side of things, have realized that it's not a one-way communication anymore, but it's a two-way communication, and that they need to become a lot more inclusive. And inclusive doesn't necessarily mean that your product gets, for example, any less valuable in a sense, but it speaks to a lot more consumers than before, because they're opening themselves up to also feedback from their customer in a sense, and I think you guys spoke quite a bit now about feedback, who likes this or who likes that. Obviously all of that was democratized through social media. Nobody likes everything, yes, in a sense, but for the first time everybody has a voice, right? I mean, we've never had that before. Every single person on the planet has a voice and can leave a comment on a new design of a car. But I think, especially, quite frankly, BMW has been a brand that has always done a quite good job in being progressive when it comes to design, almost to the degree where you have the impression that they don't give a shit if somebody likes it or not. I mean, if I think of the launch of the i3, for example, I mean, that was a pretty ugly car for a long time, and now you see it on the street and you're kind of like, it's actually kind of cool, and it's been in the market forever, so I think that's maybe what I admire the most in car design, in the sense, to really have that kind of long point of view when you design. And that by definition doesn't allow you to please people, or at least not everybody. And fashion is, of course, a lot quicker, like several collections per year, several collections per season at this point. You can react much faster to things. But nevertheless, I think it would be really interesting for car companies to figure out other ways of expressing themselves, because a car brand is maybe not just about a car.
David, listening to you, one understands how Highsnobiety could become so big in such a small time. It's a momentum of ideas. You put too many answers in my question, and I want to go back to one. I want to go back to one that is important. Cars, the object. In the end, we have to like them or not. We have to take us time, or to give us time, to understand and appreciate them. And now we should discuss a point that we can't leave untouched, a new BMW, or better, the reaction to the recent directions in BMW's design have been overwhelming, arguably in many ways. All started with the monster kidneys in the new 4, and then it came to the newest iX, which has been called, I must read the quote, a slit-eyed Allegro with squirrel teeth. And I think that must be understood. Now, Domagoj, you said, and we know 1,000 decisions are taken before a new car is released. And as a chief designer, you probably have experience in selling a design to people that have to understand it in the company before you go to the public. So you're certainly the best qualified person to explain what motivated the iX. So also what motivated these reactions, perhaps you anticipated then. Can you help us see the design through the eyes of BMW? And because you define yourself an emotional rationalist, how do you actually feel with this general critique?
Yeah, two questions. At first, maybe then the second question I answered first. Yeah, of course. I mean, as an emotionalist, I told you already before. It's not that I don't care. Yeah, I mean, of course, it's always nice that you get compliments, but it's not about this. It doesn't matter if you don't have to please everybody, because it's not about pleasing people. I mean, the company has to transport a certain message, also certain values, and this is much bigger than just pleasing somebody in the first step. The other thing, developing a car, or to how is the approach to a new product. What we do inside BMW is, before we start a product, we define clearly what is the target of such a product. It's not just that we design anything. We have a clear character which defines the product. So the character we chose for this car was the futurist. Yeah? So this was everything what the car should transport, because there's a lot of technology, but also certain values which are changing in the society towards mobility. So it's about sustainability. It's also spending time in the car in a different way. It's not just about driving fast. It's really being efficient, sustainable, and gaining lifetime while you're experienced in a car. And this was driving us with the futurist, because BMW was always very progressive in terms of leading something. Like David just mentioned, the i3 is everything else than BMW was standing for on a superficial side, but underneath, in the meaningful aspect, it was everything what BMW stand for. So it was pioneering, it was very dynamic, and it was also very technical, innovative. Yeah? So everything what BMW stands for, and it was very emotional, because there's also emotional as everything. It doesn't matter good or bad. And the iX is a car where we tease a lot of technologies which we will see in the future in every BMW, even a 3 Series or in a 5 Series, which is a much wider customer base, where you are more in really a volume of million cars. iX is, let's say, a pinnacle for these technologies, and therefore also it should look different to transport also certain change in terms of values, because it's like with the i3 and the i8, you need a manifest which shows and stands for this change. And so the iX, as it's also in terms of autonomous driving, an approach from BMW, and you would think BMW stands always for sheer driving pleasure and being the man behind the steering wheel. And so what does it make then with such a brand like BMW when you come to autonomous driving? And this is actually what was then the biggest question for us also as designers. Which qualities and values do you want to transport? And we believe it's about joy. Yeah? So sheer driving pleasure is joy. Everything has to be joyful. And if it's not, you are not driving, then it's the pleasure of being driven. And if you don't drive yourself, you have more time to look on other things. You are not concentrating on the street. And if you're doing this, then something happens like what happens also at home. You look maybe more around in the car, and then you suddenly feel, oh, this is quite nice. Yeah? That I have a different perception of joyful living and being in a space while traveling, because staying in the traffic jam today behind the steering wheel can't be so joyful. So you need to have a completely different eye and perception on your interior. And so this car was designed from inside to the outside. And this is also where you see in the interior a big change, also what means drive orientation for BMW, the choice of materials. It's a completely different approach. And in the exterior, the clean exterior, and also very obvious, distinctive to everything what was, is also like a shell. Let's have a protective shell which should look robust and very bold in appearance, but it's actually the shell around a very cozy interior.
David, you made your point very clear when you spoke about the i3. You called it ugly, but then in the end cool, a matter of time. Besides, in fashion, ugly chic became quite successful. So it seems it's only important that the thing is just not mainstream, I believe. Let me now address the fashion blogger in here. What's your take on the design of the iX?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, in a way, I think it's less disruptive than the i3 was, right? I mean, it even feels like it builds a little bit on the language that BMW introduced with that generation back then, which was super disruptive. So I feel this is much easier to accept in a way as a customer. At the same time, it feels very new, very futuristic, which I appreciate, because I think you know, as you're trying to convert customers to fully electric cars, you're anyway speaking to a crowd that wants something new, you know, that probably also wants to show that it's new and that it's disruptive. So I think I think BMW did a good job in, you know, kind of leaving its DNA on the design of the car, while still, you know, crafting something which is considerably different from an X3 or an X5. So there are other SUVs. So I think that's really cool.
I'm surprised, Domagoj. I shouldn't be surprised that you didn't discuss too much the kidneys in the iX, and even David didn't do it. Well, I will do it, and also take back the old design professor in me, and would say I'm not surprised. I was not even shocked. The kidneys always changed. If you go back to the 328 before the war, and you go through all generations of BMW, there were also radical ideas to take them completely away. Perhaps the only point is that this time in the iX, what I see is that the kidneys have become huge. So they're really big. And big makes them aggressive, a little bit like sharks, Joe. And I guess, don't you see that perhaps people may find it hard to identify with a product that conveys an aggressive image?
Yes, so indeed, kidneys are much more than just a cooler opening for BMW. It's more like it's the brand identity, and it always was, and it's something what is almost for a fashion brand. It's the identification and the corporate identity of BMW. So I think this is something which any BMW will always have in a certain execution. And now you were saying why so big, or why or that people why it has to be aggressive. I think size has nothing to do with aggressive, yeah, because it can be, but you can see also that an elephant or a whale, or let's say Baymax of Walt Disney. So I think size can be actually the opposite maybe of aggressive, and I wouldn't see the size as something which is more aggressive than something which is focused. Yeah? And so this is not the point why we made it. It has actually something to do with also a certain proportion. The kidney on every car is in relation to a certain proportion. The car is much bigger than cars were in the past. So the size of the kidney is not enormous. It's bigger than it used to be maybe on the X3, but also what we wanted is clarity in a character. So in the past, maybe you had like the kidney, one element of a lot of elements. You had headlights, you had the kidney, you had air openings around, and we wanted at the BMW that the kidney is not just like one element of many. The kidney is actually the main differentiator between all other our competitors, but also the main differentiator in between our own portfolio. Therefore, we have such a strong identity with this double kidney that we can really execute it in different ways. And if you go through our portfolio, that there are a lot of cars where it's actually very elegant, because it depends on the customers. There are some elegant creators, people outside who look for elegance, and there are some people who look for an expressive look because they want to express something. Like David mentioned, people who are early adopters and go on electrification so early in such a product, they want to express it. Here, on this car, we changed everything. The car, there is nothing, it's not a classic line on the side like a BMW. The wheel arches look different. The perception overall looks really like a car from another planet. But the kidney is showing very much the identity of BMW. And that's also the reason why we chose a vertical kidney, which is much more linked to our history than a horizontal one. So because sustainability is an important element in the future, and especially for us, because luxury and sustainable you can't change from each other. And this car is the first BMW where it's completely chrome free, and the kidney you can see as it's not an cooler element, it's more a sensor element. We inverted actually that you can still read a double kidney, so it's the color is in the middle and outside it's black, because we were choosing, or we need also black area for the sensor integration, because some sensors can't look through body paint or through chrome. So you can see that it's a kidney, it's a divided element, but it's in a completely different execution than a kidney where you need really air flowing through. And therefore we believe it's very authentic and at the same time also very bold approach to the technical requirements and the developments which we are facing. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Domagoj. I think I want to be a bit more provocative, if not mean, to you before I switch over to David. Let's discuss Tesla for a second. They have no grille, not at all, and the highest market capitalization among car manufacturers. You try to explain that there is some technology in the grille of the iX, and I believe you 100%, but in terms of meaning, are you sure after 100 and so many years of fossil mobility that electric cars still need the big grille in the front, which, as you said, it used to be for cooling, but it's not anymore?
I think a BMW will always have a double kidney in the front, because it's much more than just a functional requirement. You have functional requirements, and we use the kidney not just as a superficial element. In the past, it was fulfilling also the requirement of cooling. In the future, everybody's facing the same requirements. But the question is, how do you solve it? You can solve it without a mask and you put somewhere else black areas, or you really use the face of the car and what BMW stands for to implement this technology. And this is the reason why we did it. So the question of Tesla is a completely different approach. It's a brand who started from zero, from scratch, and wanted, and the USP or this high capitalization is because they offer something what nobody else was offering. So it's the only product which was electrified so far, and they wanted that everybody understands this because they have no cooler grille.
Okay, David, now it's you. I believe we could agree that there can be a parallel between the grille or the kidneys of BMW in car design and the monograms in the fashion business. Fashion brands use these monograms in a very creative way. Perhaps it's not a question of to have or not to have a grill, but of how to play with brand symbols.
Sure.
That is
Yeah,
the
I mean, I think you can say that. I mean, in fashion, you've certainly seen for the last decade a huge uptick in the way logos are being used. You've seen brands that have never used their logo on the exterior of their items start using logos. And again, you will never see a Louis Vuitton collection without every item having a heavy use of their monogram or their logo. The same for Gucci or most of the other luxury brands. So I think the customer wants some level of innovation, but at the same time, you also want to send them signifiers of the familiar. In a sense, that makes a product recognizable, and I think it's of course the same with cars, and I think that's probably also the one place, no matter if you're talking to a very young customer or an older customer, it's the one place where heritage is of course really beneficial. It's something you can't make up. It's something that one brand has, another doesn't, and why would BMW not be using brand signifiers that it has built over 100 years? Because that's obviously a huge advantage to have. To kind of be able to pull from 100-year history, signatures and branding elements that have been accepted by the customer base over a long time. So I think that makes complete sense.
Yeah. All great talkers, even worse than me, I would say. Let's come to a point that has been in the air for some time during our talk. So let's talk about interiors. I'm going with this revolution that I think the right word is phygital, meaning physical and digital melting together. The automobile finally becomes, to say it with Le Corbusier, a machine for living. What inner values do you want to convey at BMW? And what can we expect in the future?
So there are no air vents, there are less switches. It's an atmosphere more inspired by boutique hotel and also smart materials. So we use just there natural materials like wood, what you can see now here in the center console. And so actually there are no switches. The switches happen on real materials. So there is like the crystal crafted iDrive controller or the shifts are under wood. So you interact with a natural material. It doesn't feel so cold. It feels much more human. And the whole interior, also the doors, you have switches which are just little highlight pieces. And so the functionality becomes more as a joyful experience than interacting with a computer. And also air outlets are really slim, so you don't see the functionality how you would see it in a normal car. You don't have a classic door opener. You have just it's an electrified door opener. Also the speakers are under textile fabrics, and so the whole interior feels somehow as a relief. It needs a lot of technology to do it, and that our approach really to show or to feel the customer that he's in a high-tech product, but without showing it, without feeling too cold or like a computer.
Very good. Now let's try to build a bridge towards fashion again. You've shown a fantastic place to live. You spoke of boutique hotels. There's a lot of design references, material references, and leathers, fabrics, colors, textures, accessories everywhere. If parallels are to be found between fashion and car design, perhaps that's the interior, the place to go. On one side, most car interiors don't follow any of the interior design trends or not even the fashion trends. They are kind of 50 shades of black. David, you mentioned the Keith collaboration with BMW and the young boys going around with the jumper with the big logo on it and identifying in a way with the brand. Suddenly things like Supreme Vuitton pop up. Would you imagine the interior as a space where content collaboration, you spoke of curation, could ignite new power in the design?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think the Phygital is an important place, and I think Domagoj mentioned a lot of important things. Regarding the interior. You want things to function well, you want things to be modern, and you want new functionalities to be in your car while not feeling like you're operating a huge computer in a sense. It still needs to feel natural. I think you can quite easily go beyond the goal in a sense, when it comes to interior. But yeah, I think the interior is a very natural place for closer interaction between a car and other creative fields. Again, we all know that BMW is very active in the field of art. So I don't see why there may not be an interesting way for artists to find their ways onto digital screens of a car to allow you to customize. Fashion, leathers and other materials can quite easily find their way in there. I think certainly a young consumer base would very much enjoy being able to express themselves through various interesting interior options that are maybe a bit more specific, a bit more unique than what you can find on the market today. At the same time, I think we're all aware that most people don't drive a car for 3 months or 6 months, but for a few years. So I guess things need to be a little bit more timeless than your average fashion collection, which can be much more in the moment. But I think that's a detail. That doesn't mean that you cannot kind of bring those two things together. I mean, I saw the Kith M4 at what's it called, BMW World in Munich. I think every Kith fan would choose that car over most other BMWs, and it's still a very timeless BMW car that I think would meet all the standards that one could imagine of the brand. So I think it nicely demonstrates how you can get the two under one hood, and yeah, I think it would be very exciting to see a lot more interaction in the interior.
Yeah, and I mean, and the 150 examples of the Kith M4 almost outsold overnight. That's also an interesting perspective, I believe. Guys, talking about design is a little bit like driving, at least for me. I can hardly ever get enough. And once more, I'm reminded how good it is to think across disciplines, to exchange thoughts, and how important it is to accept change in society, but also the innovation in taste, in the speed and the look of design. So I wonder, what is your last thought, the one that crosses your mind now, to close up? So, Domagoj?
Yes, I think what is my task, or what I want to achieve, is really to make BMW a brand who customer want again. So it's like really, hey BMW, give me a reason to love you again. And for me, there are just two rules in this question. It's just to stand out, so to be stunning. And this is a superficial approach, like in a relationship, somebody who attracts you. And the other thing is to be meaningful, to transport to make a difference, which has a personal significance, an experience worth sharing. And this together ends then in a love-it experience, which is then a strong loyalty to a product. And this is everything what we try. This takes time in the car industry, so I can just expect from our fans that they are a little bit more patient than in fashion, because we can't just do it in 1-2 days. But this is my motivation and also my task. And I was very pleased to be part of this discussion, and hope that our listeners and people and customers enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really exciting space, right? Because we're really, I think probably at the most disruptive period of the automotive market that there has ever been, and so so I'm just really excited to see how how great brands like BMW will react and get through these next decades in the space, how they will answer to the customer needs in regards to electrification, in regards to sustainability, in regards to customization, collaboration. I think there's such a such a vast amount of things to answer to, and that's very complex. I think we all understand that, and that's not an easy task. But I think what we're seeing right now in the space is really, I mean, certainly the most exciting I've seen in my lifetime. And I think disruption is at the center of my job. And now I'm really excited to see disruption in the automotive space. I'm still part of a generation that doesn't need but loves cars. And I love driving a car. And so I could not be more thrilled to see what happens next. And also from my side, thanks for having me. Thanks for this great conversation and inspiration.
Well, let's have a curated disruption then, but I would not comment on this. It's time for the public to take command. Thank you, David and Highsnobiety. Thank you, Domagoj and BMW. And thank you all for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.